How's it going, guys? So, gonna be working on marbles today. Kind of just felt like doing marbles. So we're gonna start with a rose marble. The first thing I'm gonna do is pull down my stringer for the petals of my rose. This red's a little finicky, so you got to be careful with it. Gather a big clump, get it nice and hot, and then just kind of slowly pull it apart. I'll give you a nice long stringer. I usually just cut them in half, and then I just got two that I can work with. All right. Next, we're going to do green for the petals, or for the leaves around the outside. I don't need quite as much green, and I don't have quite as much green. So for this one, I'm just going to heat the end, grab it with the tweezers, and pull it down. So I'll have a much shorter stringer on the end of my rod, but I don't need as much, so that's fine. Well, that's a terrible stringer, but it'll still work. All right. Now we're going to grab our clear rod and do our gather. So this is one of those marbles that you don't end up adding a lens on afterwards. So your initial gather is pretty much the size of your marble. So you want to make sure you get a nice big gather right from the get-go. So this is what's going to be called an implosion. Basically, the idea is you do your work on a disc and then heat the rims of the disc and melt it down and press and melt it down and press. And by doing that, it actually causes the color to go inside and spread out on the inside of the clear. And that's kind of what you're looking for. And so the pattern is done sort of backwards, I guess. It doesn't much matter on the flowers, but on some other things, with a certain orientation that doesn't have like a three-dimensional orientation or a 360-degree orientation, it's a little more important. to do things backwards. For this, it's just a matter of knowing if you lay things down and then scoop them from the back to a point, what are they going to look like from that front side? So we've almost got our gather. That's pretty good. It's a good size. So then we take our smusher, smush it into a nice big disc. And try to make sure that disc is centered perpendicular to your rod. I'm going to grab our red. And basically, you draw little C's that kind of go around each other. You'll see. All right, so you can kind of see. There you go. We'll get the light from the outdoors. So it's just little commas. And then you just chase them around the entirety of the piece, keeping them relatively small, working your way out. All right. You can see that pattern kind of goes in a circle all the way through. Then you're going to grab your leaf color and do wiggly leaves around the outsides. Like that. You can kind of see right around the outside there. You got your wiggly leaves. So now first you want this all to melt in. Remember that red is kind of a finicky color, and honestly that green isn't super smooth either. So I want these to melt into my clear very carefully, which is why I'm holding it's so far out in the flame. It's got a different flame chemistry out there, and that's a better one for melting my color into my clear without causing it to boil. Once it's heated up, you can start bringing it in. All right, now that it's all melted in, we're going to do one little stamp. That kind of solidifies everything. So now I'm going to be focusing my heat on either the rim of the disc or the inside, like top edge of the cup. And so the disc is going to slowly start to dome, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to let it dome, and then I'm going to press it on the graphite so that it all goes flat again. And we're going to do that a few times, and that's going to push all of the color into the center and then out in kind of a flower pattern. and it's going to bring the leaves in and all of that, so that all of the actual color work will be on the inside of the clear in our final project or final product. So we got our first cup and press. And it doesn't really seem like a big thing until your second or third press. And then suddenly you'll see the green start to move in and the red start to move in and everything start to go in towards the center. And the pressing actually will form your flower rather than it being a straight petal. It'll cause them to go out. So our sea anemones and our air trap marbles that I've done previously, if you watch, you've seen, those I want to be just straight. I don't want them to curl or anything. And so for those, I do this process one time and then just pull out center, and that causes everything to be nice and straight. By doing it and pressing it on the marver several times, I am causing it to condense in and go out. All right, got our second cup. Press down. So now I want to focus very much on the absolute edge of my marble. I want that the leaves to start to go in. And then the next time when I press, I'm not going to press so that it goes completely flat. It's going to just kind of like flat up to a dome. And that's going to cause everything to go in, but I don't want my flower on the top to get so pushed and so flat that it actually flattens out on itself and just looks terrible. All right, set that flat. Now my leaves have started to move into the center of the marble. So one or two more, and we'll be ready to pluck out the rest of the color, similar to how you do in the air trap marble. All right, so now almost everything has moved to the inside of the clear. So one more press will get my whole piece, get the leaves in there. Right now the leaves are still two-dimensional, and I want them to get 3D by sinking into the glass. So one more press should do that, and then we'll pop this, we'll pull out the rest of the color and start shaping it. All right, so now all the color's in there. Everything's the way we want it. So now I'm going to melt this down like I was going to press, but then instead of doing that, I am going to reach in with a piece of 4mm rod and pluck out all the color that is still on the outside of the glass. Okay, I lied. We're going to press it one more time. There we go. So So there's a certain amount of leaf that I want to go in there before I start trying to pull things out. The leaves need to go up above where the meeting point of the rose petals is. And it should all pull down fine in the center and you won't see anything, but I don't want there to be a separation if the pull down doesn't happen perfectly. All right. Now we grab our 4 mil. I go down to a pin flame and focus that pin flame on the absolute center inner cup of our piece. Reach in and pull it out. This won't always happen cleanly in one move, so, you know, what you gotta do. All right. There's just a tiny little bit of color left over. I'm going to pull that off with the tweezers. All right, so now all of our colored glass is inside of our clear. So we're at the point where we're going to heat it up and start shaping it. And so you can see right now, you know, it's all kinds of a weird shape. My color is in there. So and my design is in there the way I want it. So the main goal here is to round this out carefully enough so that you don't accidentally screw up your design. So always start with a large cup, move your way down. All right, so now we pretty much got it nice and round. It's time to take it off of our thick handle, put it onto something skinnier. And at that point, I can actually increase the size of my marble ever so slightly by gathering some clear in there, and I think I am going to do that. So we add our cold seal. I don't want to add a ton. I'm just going to add a little bit. So what I'm going to do is heat up above and leave kind of a large chunk on there, and then we're going to melt that in carefully. So that's quite a bit. I'm going to melt into the marble, and that will increase its size a little bit. But I've got to be real careful and make sure that I heat that spot where the thick meets the thin, and let that spread out, because if you don't, this will ripple over and there'll be a very clear crease on your marble. And with so much work done already, that's the last thing you want. So I want to let that part become very much part of the marble before I put it back to the mold. That just means spending some time letting the heat soak in and letting it get into its new shape, which is a weird oblong thing. So now we'll just go back into the marble mold. Reshape. And now we got a nice big flower marble. It's got a nice lens on there. Flower looks real nice. I'm happy with that. All right. So now we're going to change its axis. And it is super hot right now, so I'm going to let it cool for a second before I do that. That way my my cold seal isn't like crazy attached. Remember, at this stage, you're pretty much working half the marble at a time. All right, that seems pretty good. So now we want to go down to a even smaller handle. Probably. That's a little bit small. Very lightly attach that one. Now we're only going to work that section right where our previous handle was. We don't want to get our current handle even warm. That thing needs to stay completely cold, so focus your heat very much away from that handle. So we got the flower. You can see it a little bit. Set it in the mold, tap, tap, and get rid of the scar. So as always, all of the things that I make up here, I will have pictures up tomorrow on my Facebook and Instagram, and then I will also put together a video for YouTube. Probably should have turned my kiln on. I think I forgot last week's video, so I'll probably make both. All right. So next we're going to do a different kind of flower marble. I already have the white pulled down for this. So all we need to do is get another green that's not bad. We can use that. So I just had a stringer laying on the bench randomly. So we're going to use that for our green, because that will work just fine. All right, same basic starting process as before. Gather up a large gather of clear. So these are all pretty simple flowers. I have not necessarily dove into flower implosions hugely. Vortexes are a little bit more my thing. But flower implosions, like there's certain artists like John Kabuki and like Paul Stankard and stuff, that they can do these flower implosions that are absolutely incredible. Paul Stankard does these ones where it's flowers and then like it goes down to the root structure and there's like little people climbing the roots and stuff. They're absolutely insane. I haven't gotten deep into it. I enjoy them, but not enough to like dedicate the hours and hours and hours it takes to like make these perfect, intricate, lifelike flowers. So mine are a little bit more cartoony, I would guess I would say. They are fun to make. Well, almost there. This is the part that's slow. It just takes time. You just got to sit here and rotate the glass and keep it in a nice sphere. If you want practice rotating your glass and building up that muscle memory in your hands, making marbles. Okay, I think that's probably pretty good. So now, same thing as last time. You just take it out, put it on the graphite, and then mush all around the rod so that you get as large a disc as you can. Got our disc, nice and perpendicular to the rod. Now we're going to find a blue. That's bluish. And we're going to do kind of a 5 points of a star. So like if you do your basic star, every one of those points, you're going to put a little dot. And you want it to be to cover a very large surface part of your marble or your disc. The top one wasn't quite as high as I'd like it to be, but that's fine. Now, you're going to take your clear and connect the dots. Actually, on this, because this is a weird color, I'm actually going to heat those up, melt them in a little bit, stamp them down, and then connect the dots. You want to lay this thick stringer on pretty thick. So take your time. As you hit each dot, make a sharp turn to the next dot. Just like that. Got kind of a pentagon going on. Now we're going to put some dots in the center that act as the pistons of our flower. And now we'll do our leaves. same way as we did them before. So there's our back design. Cup, pistons in the center, pedals on the outside. So now just like before, we want to melt all that in. Luckily, these colors aren't quite as finicky as that red. That red really likes to boil. It's like its favorite thing to do. So these melt in pretty easily. I don't have to be quite as careful with my flame chemistry. All right, sweet. So now we begin the imploding process. Again, so this time I actually want it to flush out a little bit more. That'll actually make the flower, which I guess is kind of a daffodil, maybe. I don't know my flowers. It'll make it bigger and more robust. And everybody loves a robust flower. Same thing, concentrate on the inside of the cup and along the edges of the disc. Form yourself a cup and then press on the graphite. If your disc is not centered to your, or perpendicular to your rod, like mine is not right now, you can use that time that you press down to try to center it a little bit. You don't want to make any huge movements or it'll actually move your flower, which is not what you want. But you can make tiny little adjustments that'll only move the clear part of your work. And that way you can center that a little bit better so that the remainder of the implosion will go smoother. Today is probably going to be a shorter stream than usual. Got cousin in town, and I've been working kind of crazy hours, so I am mildly exhausted. But we'll get at least a couple hours in, one way or the other. All right, so now all of the glass is starting to push to the center, creating clear on the outsides. So a couple more presses and we should be all set. I want to make sure that the marble drags down and so that these presses actually affect the cup of my flower. So far, the cup's pretty much going straight up. It's not doing that, and so I need to change that. All right, so now my cup pressed itself out a little bit. So I think we're going to do one more press, which will probably turn into two because I'm terrible at judging these things. and then we'll reach in there and pluck out the center. And this technique doesn't have to necessarily be done as a flower. Like, again, that John Kabuki, basically the best marble maker ever, in my opinion. He does like these little people that are like ninjas wearing Raiden hats and carrying like little opal batons and stuff. Does it the exact same, this technique, not the exact same way. He does like this well instead of like okay. But you can create some really intricate images doing this particular technique. All right, I think we're good. So now we're going to melt this down, create a cup for the last time, focus our heat on the bottom there, and then reach in with some 4 mil and pluck out the color. The trick with marbles is really to work them kind of slow. Everything in glass seems a little intense because there's a giant freaking flame and everything's at 1,000+ degrees and blah, blah, blah. But you actually want to slow down your process pretty, like a lot. You want to slow down your process quite a bit while you're doing this and really just let your piece soak heat. That's something you'll hear me say a million times. And it's really just because, like, especially when you're working with marbles and solid work and things that are really big, just letting them be incredibly hot will help you alleviate a lot of your issues. Glass likes being insanely hot. Things smooth out and even out at high temperatures. So try to let it do what it wants to do. Now I'm just plucking the last of the color off the back. So now we're down to our whole piece being inside clear and funkily shaped. So now we take our funkily shaped blob of glass with flour in it and go ahead and start straightening it all out. Start with the large mold, work your way down. So this one, it just caused me some issues during the whole process. So that last bit, I really put a lot of pressure into that while I was marbling it out. And so there's all kinds of creases and stuff. You can do that. It doesn't really end up affecting your final product. But after you do that, you really, really, really need to hit it in the flame, get it nice and hot, and allow that all those creases and ridges and everything to work themselves out before you move on to the next step. All right, sweet. So now we're going to move it on to smaller handle. This one I actually am not going to be increasing in size, so I want to melt off much closer to the marble. I can increase it a little bit, but not like some kind of significant amount. Same as last time, focus our heat, get that to melt in. You don't want to crease it. Once that's all nice and melted in, finish its final shape. That's a cool one. So you can kind of see it. All right, got to change the axis. Focus on half the marble at a time. Make sure its shape is perfect, which this one definitely is. So those who know me know I'm a huge fan of the good enough as opposed to perfect. The one huge exception to that is when you're rounding out your marble, it has to be perfect. It can't suck even a little. If it does, it's incredibly noticeable. And you know, when someone's rolling something around in your hand, you will subconsciously feel if it's not perfectly spherical. Always make sure that the shaping part of this is absolutely perfect. The design can be good enough, but the shape has to be perfect. Onto a smaller handle, and then get rid of the scar left over by the last handle. And then we let that cool for a sec. Tap, tap. Get rid of the little scar. So that's a cool one. I don't know. Yeah, you can't really see it. Be sure to check that one out. tomorrow when I post up pictures. It actually came out really nice. Okay. All right, sweet. So next, I had kind of an idea of something I wanted to try, so I'm going to try it, and we're going to see if it looks good. And it may not, but I don't really care. None of my rods are the right size. So this is going to be a type of vortex marble, which means that I'll be pushing the lens in at the end of the project. And so anytime I do that, I have to make sure I have like the correct size piece of glass. Otherwise, I'm pushing the lens in and all of a sudden my rod's this big and everything's gone to hell. So I'm going to do that. Okay. So what I'm going to do, you can tell I thought about this a whole lot ahead of time. What I'm going to do is my nebula marbles, if you've seen my previous ones, I'm going to take a section of that style, cone it, and lens it, and then make that the part of a vortex. So it may, in theory, have like a nebula going down into the vortex. So that could be really cool. Or not. I don't know. We're going to give it a shot. So instead of actual color for the nebula's like color part, I'm going to use fume. So I'm going to fume over the piece, cover that with clear a couple times, I think. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to fume it down a couple times, and that will help create the little striations that are going to be our nebula. I don't want to do this too huge because I actually want the cone to be relatively small. And we're going to be adding a lot to this as we do the project. So we're going to just kind of, no, I don't even like that. Lollipop it. Take our silver. Preheat it. Tiny little flame. Lay down a layer. Cover two little sections of it with clear. Now I'm going to heat that whole thing up and flatten it again. This is also going to burn a lot of the silver off the spot that does not have the two clear lines over it, thus defining them as actual lines. So I don't know if you can see, Oh yeah, you can. See how there's just those two clear lines? We're now going to do the same thing again. And we're just going to build this color layer up with all fume. And I actually want to make sure that I burn off all that excess fume. Just because if you don't, rather than a real cool streak of color, the whole thing's just going to be colored. It doesn't look. It's not. It still looks cool, but it's not the intended purpose. You want your piece to look deliberately cool, not accidentally cool. All right, last time. All right, so now we're going to twist it all up, pull it, and then gather it back up again. The main trick right here is you don't want to gather any air bubbles, so be careful not to do that while you're twisting. Well, that looks cool. I may have to do another project where I don't twist it up as much. All right, give it a second, then we're going to gather it all back up. Gather randomly. Make sure that the glass you're gathering onto, as well as the glass you're gathering from, are both very hot. That way you do not trap air bubbles. All right, that's enough because we don't want this to be, I don't want my disc to be huge. I'm only trying to make a 1-inch marble out of this, so small cone. So now we heat this whole thing up, melt it, cone it. Right now we got a blob. Remember, you want that cone to be short and fat. That comes down to a very, very, very concise point, or very, I don't know. Comes down to a point, sharp, a very sharp point. All right, so you got your cone. Now we're gonna add our back. Normally when we're doing this, we do a bunch of other stuff to the outside, but I don't want to. I want to preserve that kind of pristine nebula. I don't want any frit or anything that you're seeing behind it, so we're just going to go ahead and straight add black. We're using black because nebulas are in space and space is black. So you have fine artistic reasoning at work. So just like any other vortex, start thin and then get thick as you cover towards the bottom. That way you can maintain the structural integrity of your cone while you're shaping this later on. So again, because this is like space, I am going to melt this and just kind of do a frit pattern on the back. That's going to be stars, or an attempt at stars. So I'll pour out some star white. What do I need thicker than this? Okay, so I've got some star white that's very thick. I'll lay a couple of those down. I got some star white that is fine frit. Lay that over it. And then we're just going to take a tiny pinch of amber purple. That amber purple will add some streaky, like nebulous qualities, hopefully, in theory, allegedly. And yeah, we're going to add that in. We don't want to add very much, and we actually don't want to pick up very much when we gather it, but we just want just enough to add a little bit of like interest to the back there. So we'll heat this up and just kind of tap it in the frit. Now, star white is a cruddy color. It boils real easily, so I want to bring it way out here in the flame. And that didn't gather super evenly, but that's okay. I think I'm going to leave it. I think I like it. I don't want to gather too much, because when you look up at the night sky, it's not just, well, sometimes it is. It's not just like solid blanket of stars. So you want to make sure that you, knocking my wires down. You want to make sure that it has some interest, but it's not overwhelming. Because again, the back of this marble is not supposed to be the focal point. So I'm going to go ahead and marble this down a little bit. It's got this weird little crevice in the side. I don't know if you can see that as I rotate it. I kind of just have to let it soak in heat to get that to go away. If I try to force it in the mold, it'll actually fold over on itself and crimp and look terrible. And the whole point of this entire project is to not look terrible. All right, so now I'm going to add a crescent moon onto the back of this. Crescent moons are actually surprisingly easy to do. I'm not going to do it directly on the back because that's where I'm going to attach with my punty, and I don't want any punty nonsense to mess up the moon. If it messes up a star, you're not going to notice that much. If it messes up the moon, you're going to notice it. So for the moon, I'm going to start by grabbing some, whatever this is called, caramel. Take some caramel, pick a spot, make a big dot. Just like that. We're going to melt that in. I stand on this like it's a salon mat, like foamy salon mat, super comfortable, but it just like slowly kind of moves to the right as I work, and so then eventually I have to like go over here and push it back. I feel like I'm working on a typewriter where it's just like as I work, just ching. So yeah, challenges in glass blowing. So you want to melt this in. You don't want to mold it until it's almost completely melted in because you want this to be a very good sphere. All right, once that has melted in, you're going to actually add a dot of black that is going to be offset so that it covers a chunk of the dot of caramel. And so by offsetting that dot that you're laying down with the black, which is the same black as the back of your overall background, it's going to create a nice crescent for your little crescent moon. Yep, that worked. You don't want that dot to be too big. It's got to be put in the right spot so that your crescent curls over. If it's too big, then your crescent's just like, and it doesn't quite look right. So placement of that dot is relatively important. All right, so now we are done with our back. Oh yeah, that moon looks cool. We're done with our back. So it's time to push in our lens. Now, because the back is solid black, I'm going to add some black to the end of my punty. That way when I attach it, it'll be black on black. And that way when I tap it off later, if it leaves anything, it's just going to leave black, which is the same color that's already there, instead of it leaving a little bit of clear, which 99% of humanity wouldn't notice and I will see every time. So just like we do on every other vortex marble, you're now going to focus your heat right where the color meets the clear, where the thin meets the thick, whatever you want to call it. It's all kind of the same spot. You want to push those together, and you want to make sure that they don't curl over. You want them to melt into each other. Very important. So, rule of thumb for me, as you've heard before, I'm sure, at least 50% of the marble needs to be clear, needs to be lens, but less than like 75%. So anywhere happily in that median between 50 and 75% of the marble should be clear. Go slow, take your time. All right, I think we're good. Tap off your handle. And now you can see how we got that. And yeah, you're going to get hand gestures and noises. That is my method of teaching. You want to hit that little crease right where the color and the clear meet and wait for it to go from a defined pop to a swoop. Once you get that in there, then you can hit the mold for a minute. It's going to cause it to do the same thing again. Keep doing that. Don't just try to force that closed or it's going to cinch over on itself and will make your marble look crappy. And as I said, the main goal of this project, and almost every project, is to not look crappy. This part of the project's a little hot. All right, so it got bigger than I meant it to. So we got to grab our 1.5 and 2-inch marble molds. This probably isn't, but this is probably about 1.12 or 1.25, somewhere in between there. But for your initial shaping, you need much larger generally than the actual final circumference or diameter of the marble. So that's why I need to break out the 1.5 mold, even though this is nowhere near 1.5 inches. Find a little bit of shaping. Now we actually have a marble. All those cold work marks. Not bad. All right, so next we're going to take it off of our large handle, put it onto the smaller one. I'm again using my punty that I tipped with black to avoid scarring the back in any way that matters. Take off that handle. I don't need to increase the size of this at all. In fact, I want to make sure that even that little bleb that's on the end there gets taken off. And yes, its technical name is actually bleb. Now we'll melt that in. Looks like we got a pretty cool pattern going. I won't be able to tell for another second or two. Yep, that is most definitely nifty. All right. Change the axis. Half a marble at a time. Small punty. So you can see it a little bit there, the moon and stars. So I was totally considering being lazy on that one and not adding the small punty and just popping it off. But that last punty left this giant mark that I got to melt in, so I'm kind of glad I decided not to be lazy. Sweet. Well, that one came out good. Whew. All right. So I think I'm only going to do one more marble, one more piece for today. Like I said, we're going to do a shorter stream than usual. But because of that, I think I'm going to throw like everything into that one. So we're going to go with a dichro vortex marble with an opal, and we're going to do the star and moon pattern on the back. Yeah, it's going to look awesome. I got to get some water first. I also think we're going to try to layer the dichro, so I'm going to put one dichro layer, melt it all in nicely, and then put another one directly on top of it to kind of thicken the amount of dichro so that hopefully when you look in on it in the vortex, it's going to really stand out. Get those melting. Okay. All right. So first we're going to do our opal. So the way I do opals is always stick the opal down a tube, start heating at the bottom, and you just want to slowly heat up and around the opal, and it will get covered with glass without trapping a bunch of air bubbles, which is the goal. And I always kind of just suck in a little bit right at the very end, and that kind of solidifies the. It sucks the rest of the air around the opal so that your opal is completely encased and clear without any excess bubbles or colors or any weirdness that you've got going. So despite my best efforts, there is a bubble in there. So when that happens, I'm going to change the orientation of my opal. So I put a handle where the bubble is, melt this off, get rid of the clear, or the air that's trapped. And so now, when I attach my opal to my large rod, what you're seeing, because this is going to be the lens, so you're going to be looking in through this direction. So the way that you're seeing the opal, the bubble is on the back. And I'm not saying that means you're not going to see it. You can see it probably, but it's going to reduce its focus a ton. So you're not really, unless you really look at it, which, you know, it's a marble, you should. But unless you're really staring at it, you're not going to immediately see like, oh, hey, a bubble. It's going to be very hidden. So now we're going to add what is going to be our cone. Because remember, when you put an opal in there, that's not part of the cone. You don't want that to be your cone. You want that to sit comfortably above your cone, and as such, will be technically in the lens of your piece. And it looks better that way. It sits a little bit more in the foreground. And if you're spending the time and money to throw an opal into your piece, you want to really see it. So I'm just gathering up a bunch of dust to form my cone. That should be good because we're going to end up adding a whole bunch of stuff to this anyways. Melt this down a little bit. First, I kind of cylinder it back out, and that's because, again, I don't want my opal to be part of my cone. So I want to make sure that everything is separated before I start working on the actual cone part of the piece, so that opal comfortably stays in my lens. Then cone it out. Remember, you're looking for short and fat. Okay. Nice cone. Grab your dichro. Attach to the corner. Now remember, you want to preheat your dichro on the side that doesn't have the metal finish. So get that nice and ready to go. You want your cone to be really, 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 really warm. And then we're just going to set it once it's nice and warm, kind of do a little bit of a roll. And that's going to adhere the dichro to my cone. Well, that wasn't what we were trying to do. Try that again. It's a little bit more dichro than I necessarily want, so we're going to trim it. Then roll the clear over the edges. Not bad. And then we're going to recone it, and then we'll add our second layer of dichro on top of this one. Ah, get out of here. Suicidal insects, definitely a hazard of the job. Same deal, only this time I want to be very careful to adhere this dichro directly on top of my dichro that's already on there. Just like before, there's a little bit much, so we're going to get rid of some of it. Adhere and roll. And cone. Now we're going to grab some cobalt blue, cover over our dichro. We're going to shrink this down a little bit. The amount of glass that got added when I added the dichro is pretty extreme, and I'd prefer this didn't turn into a 2.5-inch marble. So we're going to take some of that off and then recone. Like about to cover it with blue, and I'm like, yeah, this is going to be pretty huge. All right. You want to go kind of quick because you're not looking to leave a whole lot of blue. You just want it to be there as a nice backing to the dichro. So I'm not trying to increase the marble to any kind of huge proportions. Just adding blue. And then I've done this on one previous, and I thought it looks cool, so I'm going to go ahead and add one line of white right down the side. And that kind of defines your little twist nicely. It looks good. Recone. And next we're going to actually do the twist. The thing that makes a vortex marble a vortex marble. So we're focusing our heat on the thick spot. The thin spot will just get hot on its own. And as it starts to warm up, just start to twist it a little bit. We don't want this twist to be too extreme. Like we don't want to do like 12 twists. That'll be too much. It won't look good. So you just want to do a nice clean twist. That's good. So that uncentered our opal a little bit, which isn't a huge deal, but normally it's something you want to try to avoid. All right. Now it's got its twist in there. Go ahead and recone. Short and fat. This one's a little bit too long. The problem with when they're long like that is you have difficulty maintaining it as you round out the marble. Because, you know, your marble, you're squishing it in to get it to be a sphere. So if your cone is real long and you have to squish it real far, it ends up destroying your vortex pretty handily. So short and fat will get you, your cone will be staying. All right, should be. Looks good. Now again, on this one, I don't have to do a whole bunch of other stuff on the inside. When you look down on the inside, all I want you to see is that opal in the top and that nice vortex going down. So I don't want to obscure that with any frit or anything like that. So we'll add our back. We're doing black again because we're doing the star pattern, and space is black. Damn consistent too. And then just adding a little bit to the end here. Again, just to help maintain the cone. All right. So now we're going to melt this all in. Roll in our frit to create our star pattern. You don't want to completely turn this into a marble before adding your frit, because rolling a sphere in that frit to get a nice random pattern is kind of difficult. It's easier to do in the cylinder shape. Go ahead. This one's a little heavier on the stars, which is totally fine. And then we'll shape it down to it's half marble. Well, I mean, it's a marble, but it's only the back half so far. And then we'll add our moon. All right, now that we got that on there, I have to find my black. Make sure it is indeed black. There's nothing worse than like going to make the crescent of your moon and accidentally putting like blue down instead. So then it doesn't even look like anything. It just looks like a dot. All right, so now time to lens it up. All right, again, the back of our marble is black, so we're gonna add a little bit of black to the punty. Ooh. Oh, that was nowhere near the center. And begin the process of making your lens. This one's going to have a slightly smaller lens because my handle is super short. For this one, we're going to go with the straight 50%. And then I think when I take it off the large handle and move it onto the smaller one, I will melt it off high enough to add a little bit more lens to the final product. This is just super short and a little burny at the moment. Almost there. All right. Now we'll take our thick handle off. So the amount of dichro in this one's pretty extreme, so I think it's going to end up looking really cool. Oh. I actually don't think I'm going to add a bunch to the lens. Looking down there, the vortex came out pretty nice. And the marble's a good size. So I think I'm just going to leave it. I will gather that in instead of pulling it off, however. Woo! Handle got a little too hot, started moving. It happens. Oh yeah, that's a good one. So you can't really see, but you got the opal in there, and the vortex is really nice. Super heavily dichro laden, so that's nice. Change the axis. There's a little bit of texture in there somewhere. I can't see it, but I can feel it. So I am heating this up again and make sure I'm going to roll through there. That way anything that's... Yeah, there we go. Okay, now it's gone. So you'll feel it if there's a little bit of texture somewhere. It's just kind of a bump when you're rotating something. So now we'll add our last handle. So there was a cold crease. It was basically just a slight crease in the clear from a previous rolling where it didn't quite get melted out all the way. So you got to make sure you hit those. Otherwise, there's like a slight shimmer, like a just not really discoloring, but it warps your piece a little bit. So you gotta get rid of that. So when people are looking through the lens down your vortex, it doesn't just randomly warp. And there we have that one. So, as I said before, we're going to do a slightly smaller stream. I got family in town and been working like crazy, so I'm a little tired. However, Sunday, I am going to be doing a whole bunch of pieces for the Glass Mule, which is a shop in Indiana. So if you want to check out first the pieces being made, and then if you're interested in any of them for sale, they will be over at the Glass Mule. I'll be doing that on Sunday. So that should be a full-length stream. This one was just a little short. We've been building a tortoise cage and all kinds of nonsense. So, yeah, if you want to support us, follow me on Facebook at Vulcan Glass Art Studio. Follow me on Instagram at Vulcan Glass Art. And you've already found my YouTube page. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, hit that notification bell, let you know anytime I go live. I do live streams every Friday and Saturday, usually 2.5, 3 hours. This one's a little short. Sorry about that. Yeah. And if you want to support us further, you can check us out on Patreon at Vulcan Glass TV and become one of our patrons. And I will be happy to make you some really cool stuff live on air. So also all of the products that I did today will be on display. Like I'll have pictures of them up tomorrow on my Facebook, on my Instagram, and then I will do a short little slideshow video here on YouTube of all of those products. Everything's available. If you like it, let me know. I'd be happy to sell it to you. And yeah, I also will do last week's slideshow video. I forgot to do that. Sorry about that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.